Hillary has been lengthening her excuses as to why she lost the election. She didn't really lose the election. It was stolen from her by, I think it's up to 24 different excuses she has now. Number 24 is content farms in Macedonia. And as I said, my grandfather was a Macedonian content farmer, and we often think about, gathering on the porch and recalling the old days on the Macedonian continent. He never thought that the old content farmers he left behind in Macedonia would one day steal the U.S. presidential election. They are gnarled, hard-working Macedonian peasants, and the way they were able to reach out.
Zoran Zaev's government press office released a statement after Zaev's meeting with U.S. Ambassador to Macedonia Kate Burns, stating that Burns welcomes the government's efforts to curb, quote, inflammatory public discourse, unquote. Legitimate question. Who gets to determine what is, quote-unquote, inflammatory? This is a very dangerous road to follow when you start regulating speech, and there is no end to the abuses. In that same press release, it was noted that Burns supports Macedonia's entry into the EU without having to accede to Bulgaria's demands, which is odd when you think about it. The same U.S. Embassy said that Macedonia had to accede to Greece's demands to get into NATO. Such double standards continue to erode the position of influence of the U.S. in Macedonia. This just points out to the fact that more and more people are pointing out the obvious hypocrisy in allowing Greece to make demands on Macedonia that it change its name, and much else, and then stating that Bulgaria cannot do the same thing. Granted, neither country should be allowed to make these types of demands to enter the NATO or EU clubs, but both organizations are showing their age these days and showing that their commitment to openness, transparency, and democracy is slipping away as they grow older and falter. But worry not. Macedonia's prime minister, presiding over an epic COVID crisis with upwards of 1,500 Macedonians dead, believes that legalizing marijuana for recreational use will solve all of Macedonia's problems. We'll discuss all of this and more on this episode of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. I'm Jason Miko, coming to you from the foot of the Catalina Mountains in Oro Valley, Arizona.
This is Cvetin in Skopje, Macedonia.
How are you doing, Cvetin?
Fine. What you drinking there?
Just water right now. So.
Oh, still early there.
It's one. I just brushed my teeth an hour ago from breakfast. I had a late breakfast, so I could start on the Lamastica now, but
that's
maybe I should.
Normal under COVID.
It kills all germs. It kills all COVID viruses in your mouth.
Actually,
so,
yeah, that should be a good selling point.
I think so. Yeah, actually, you could maybe make it medicinal. Rub it on your hands instead of sanitizer or something like that. But that would be a waste.
We should invest in
that. Now, hey, don't tempt me. That's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Oh, well, let's see. What have we got to talk about this week? There's always plenty to discuss. I think kind of starting with, as we've been talking about for several months, it feels like years now, the Bulgaria's demands and, of course, their latest demands as the Bulgarian foreign minister, or her latest reasoning, I should say, is that the so-called quote-unquote hate speech directed toward Bulgarians. And as I started in the monologue, Kate Burns, the U.S. ambassador, met with Zoran Zaev this week. Today we're recording this on Sunday, the 22nd of November, episode 94 of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. Burns met with Zaev early this week, and of course it's funny. It's the government of Macedonia that always puts out a press release, not the U.S. embassy. So I assume that the press release from the Macedonian government is accurate because the U.S. doesn't dispute it, which would be awkward for everybody involved, especially the U.S. ambassador. So we assume that what the government press release said is accurate and reflects what Zaev and Burns talked about, that Burns welcomes the government's efforts to, quote-unquote, curb inflammatory public discourse. And this is a big debate. We've talked about this, I've written about this, etc., so-called hate speech. And I know Europeans aren't big on free speech, and that's one of your problems over there. Conservatives, of course, are, but in general, European governments, etc., don't necessarily believe in speech. Although Macron these days is very vigorously defending speech and getting no support whatsoever from his fellow EU countries. But when it comes to Macedonia and Bulgaria, and the Bulgarian government's claim that Macedonians are engaging in quote-unquote hate speech towards Bulgaria, what does that mean? What is inflammatory public discourse? Who gets to determine what is inflammatory? And this is the whole issue with so-called quote-unquote hate speech. Is there speech that it can be called hateful? Well, of course, yes, absolutely. The old saying that we have here in English, I don't know if you have something similar in Macedonian, that we're all taught as children is sticks and stones can break my bones, but names can never hurt me. Which is not true, actually, as it turns out. It's something. It's good to tell young children that, to kind of encourage them and bolster them and give them confidence, etc. But yeah, words do hurt. But amongst children in a playground is one thing that can be supervised, but among adults in a free, self-governing society. Well, people should be allowed to say just about whatever the hell they want, even if it's directed towards a foreign government that is behaving like children. So, number one, who gets to determine what is inflammatory public discourse? And number two, equally, if not more important, what do you do about it? So what is Zaev, how is Zaev's government reacting to this new request by the Bulgarians to stop hate speech towards Bulgaria?
Yeah, I remember we kept ranting about this on the podcast even before it was being practically implemented, because it's really so outrageous. These are public officials of a country, and if you can't criticize them, even using ugly language, who can you criticize? It's like that old joke. Like, we can say stuff about the president of America in Russia. They say, well, yeah, sure, so can we. We can criticize the president of America. I mean, I love it that it actually, the first victim of this is one of my old nemesis, a former manager of the MIA news agency, who played a role in having me fired from there, who actually is so corrupt. I had the pleasure of helping publish quite a lot of information of his personal corruption when he was spokesman for Branko Crvenkovski, the president. This is Zoran Ivanov, who practically had all of the funds, all of the spare funds, absent, what you have to pay for utilities and salaries from the office of the president, given to his son, who was then giving them to a group of Slovenian PR doctors who were working to establish like a PR machine for the SDSM party. Completely illegal, completely, ridiculously corrupt and nepotistic. So Zoran Ivanov was, when SDSM came back into power, assumed power in 2017, he was named to a mostly ceremonial role in MIA, which he, as I said, founded, the state news agency. And, he's exceptionally, ugly, in his comments, and goes on TV every day and talks crap about Vemera and whoever. He's like one of the most notable SDSM spokespersons, because he does not refuse a TV invitation. He's practically on TV every other day defending Zaev. And he said in a tweet about Zakharieva and Dora Bakoyannis that they're who only get off on blocking Macedonia. Don't worry, I'll bleep most of this, I guess. And since so if a private person says this, both Prespa Treaty and the Zaev Treaty with Borisov says that the government needs to discourage this type of comments. I mean, this is the crazy part of the treaties, which we often pointed to as being crazy. Now, he's an official,
right?
So he's not facing criminal charges for hate speech, for incitement of hatred or whatever. They still haven't adopted laws on implementation of the treaty, which would, I guess, make it a crime to say something like this about a neighboring country or official of it. But he's being fired from his position in MIA because of this comment. So this is the sanction. And then immediately a bunch of other equally, horrible people who support Zaev, like Tito Bilicanec, who's, the joke is that his name is Tito. named after the Yugoslav dictator, and Bulgaria wants us to stop honoring him, etc. So he quickly said, okay, I'm deleting all my comments about Bulgaria before, I catch Prime Minister Zaev's eye, the dear leader's eye. So it's very funny. On one hand, obviously I want to defend Zoran Ivanov. On the other hand, screw him and everything he stands for. They asked for this, they supported the treaty, and now they have it, and they absolutely deserve it. So Zaev sends police to private people's homes all the time for comments aimed at him. Like when they would curse him, they would say, go you and the horse you rode in on, etc. And often the police declares this a threat on the life of the prime minister and sends the police at the door of the person who wrote this. This actually happens in Macedonia, and quite often. Mm-hmm. But this is the first time we get this for insulting a neighboring country at a time when literally, my Twitter, Facebook is flooded with comments at Bulgaria from Macedonians, which usually refer to, their Tatar heritage. This is one common insult. We've discussed this before.
Yep.
That they are a people who, these Bulgarians say this themselves about themselves, but it's an insult if a Macedonian says it, that they are a tribe which lived in the steppes of, I guess, of Volga, and had a Turkic or Tataric origin, I guess. Mm-hmm. And the other one is that when they were especially badly bankrupt after communism, and we were slightly less bankrupt, they, poor Bulgarians would come here, they would sell whatever, like cheese often, and clothes and whatnot. We would travel to Kustendil, just across the border, to buy. I remember we bought once a small cooking oven, then we couldn't get across the border, and it was a big deal. So, but then one of the popular myths and stories here is that, Bulgarian women would come here a lot, and and this is often mentioned in these slurs. These are the two main slurs which you get, and you get them by the buckloads. Mm-hmm. While on the other hand, but it's important to know that Macedonian officials are tight-lipped, while in Bulgaria you both get people commenting angrily at Macedonians, saying, you're a made-up nation, Tito came up with you, Albanians are going to walk all over you any moment now, etc. But you also have the officials saying this. You're a made-up nation, Tito made you up, I'm going to send a military regiment to Skopje. This is said by the foreign minister, the defense minister, yeah. So it's a much higher level, of insults. But obviously it's only us who need to uphold by the treaty. Bulgaria doesn't have to uphold by the treaty, and we have the first victim. I couldn't be happier about the choice of the victim, but also, it's the principle, and we need to defend the principle that you should be allowed to talk trash about a neighboring country and an official of it, because, basic democratic principles. And the fact that U.S. ambassador is, parachuting into this dispute in a very un-American fashion, that's, just speak volumes.
Exactly, yeah. And, of course, now, as conservatives, as generally polite people, as gentlemen most of the time, we want to be careful of what we say in our speech. And obviously, I don't go around insulting people, for the fun of it and whatnot. Sometimes my anger gets the best of me, and I make mistakes and whatnot. But all of that aside, it is still in a self-governing society, in a, to use the phrase, even though I don't like it, in a democracy, people should be able to say whatever they want, and they should not be punished for it. And so, if I want to look at the Bulgarian foreign minister, Zahareva, and tell her "minu perse," which is the most horrible thing you can say to somebody in the Estonian language, so we don't have to bleep it, I should be able to do that. And I'm a private entity, and of course now in our world of not only am I a private entity, I'm an American, and so in the world of technology and social media, etc. How in the world do you regulate that? Now, I am looking here, and I do want to, what you were just talking about there, the double standard. We'll get into that in a second. But I am looking here at the so-called Prespa Agreement, Article 6, and which is this whole thing is dangerous. Article 6, subsection 2 says, each party, meaning Greece and Bulgaria, shall promptly take effective measures to discourage and prevent any acts of private entities likely to incite violence, hatred, or hostility against the other party. If a private entity in the territory of a party engages in such activities without that party's knowledge, I don't know how that is regulated, that party shall, upon such acts coming to its attention, promptly take all necessary measures as provided by law. Article 6, subsection 3, each party shall prevent and discourage acts, including acts of propaganda, by private entities likely to incite chauvinism, hostility, irredentism, and revisionism against the other party. So this is officially a part of the so-called Prespa Agreement that says it gives the government the right to crack down on private individuals and private entities for engaging in what they call so-called hate speech. This is just, I cannot stress how dangerous this is. This leads to very dark places. It leads to, eventually, authoritarianism and then totalitarianism. You guys came out of communism and socialism. It goes right back there. But to your point on the double standards, so yes, and this is something we've been talking about quite a bit, and it's almost funny to watch the debate unfold in the Twitter sphere. How folks are saying, well, Bulgaria can't do this, but these are the very same people who were saying, a few years ago, well, Greece can. Well, I mean, to Bulgaria's point, looking at Greece, sure, they're right. Greece got away with it. Why can't we? Now, I would love to see, and to the point in the opening monologue there that Burns said, we don't think bilateral disagreements should have anything to do with Macedonia getting into the EU, but not her, but the previous ambassador, Jess Bailey, basically said that, well, bilateral agreements do matter, and you have to do whatever Greece says. So that the position of the U.S. government, the State Department, which doesn't have a very good position in Macedonia anyway, is further eroded. But that also then has a negative effect on the U.S. as a whole, which pains me as an American. But I would like to propose, and I'd like to see, and I think you and I talked about this in a previous podcast some months, maybe years ago, of groups like the Atlantic Council and other international think tanks. Why not have an open public discussion about these issues and why Greece could do it but Bulgaria can't? And I'd love to propose that. I'd love to see some think tanks in Macedonia do this, but I don't think they will.
The Atlantic Council, that crazy person there, Damon something. He once said that crazily sycophantic to the Prespa Treaty. Not uncritically supportive of it and of Zaev and of Dimitrov especially. He once said that, we're supposed to have a discussion with critics of the Prespa Treaty as well. Mm-hmm. And I said, fine, and I kept pinging at him. I think he replied once on Twitter, Damon, when's the debate, are we going to have this online somehow? I can make, propose people or whatever. And it never happened. They kept discussing and debating the treaties with supporters only, and this is why we're only now finding out about all these glaring deficiencies in the treaties and how unimplementable they are, because they're bonkers. They're out of this world. They're not contributing to having good, friendly relations between Macedonians and Greeks. Okay, that's a given. We're not supposed to like each other. This is the Balkans. But also now between Macedonians and Bulgarians, which is not supposed to be that way. We're not supposed to have this dispute with so kin peoples like the Serbs or the Bulgarians or the Croats or the Montenegrins or whatever. So, as you said, when Gruevski was in charge, he could do no right, and the Greeks could do no wrong. even though, Gruevski would deliver on this tremendous economic prosperity, deregulation, and he governed the country of the two biggest nations with a workable coalition without ethnic tensions spiraling, etc. But he, wouldn't deliver on this one big thing, which nobody wanted him to deliver. He didn't want to deliver on the name change, and he said, okay, I'm not doing this. And so he could do no right for the internationals, and whatever the Greeks did to us, they were right. Whatever we did in response or didn't give up on the name change, that was all wrong, and that was all horrible and nationalist, etc. And now, yes, as you noticed, now that Bulgaria is doing exactly the same, using a treaty which is verbatim, copy of the Prespa Treaty, except with slightly lesser guarantees for Bulgaria, so it doesn't include constitution change, etc., but it gives it the right to veto us and to demand all these concessions, even more intrusive and widespread than the Greek concessions. And now the internationals, the same people who supported the Prespa Treaty, people like Damon McWilson from the Atlantic Council, or the Biebers, or the journalists who supported the Prespa Treaty. I had an exchange with Martens from FATS, who supported the Prespa Treaty, but now says this is outrageous. No, it's exactly the same thing. There is literally no difference in the relationship, in the power arrangement, in the type of demands they're asking, and in the refusal of Zaev to deliver because he signed the treaty. Even worse, Gruevski wouldn't deliver on something that he never signed on to. Zaev did sign on to a wholesale change of Macedonian history and accepting of specifically named types of demands by the Bulgarians, and now he's failing to deliver on them. If you look into your bond, as Shakespeare would say, Zaev is in the wrong. The Bulgarians are completely in the right. And now all of these people, they say, no, but listen, Bulgarians are going too far. Zaev, they shouldn't push on Zaev this much. This is outrageous. These are nationalist demands. Greek demands were nationalist as well. And the only thing I can think of that's the difference here is that initially it was Gruevski, a right-winger, against Tsipras, a left-winger, and Gruevski wouldn't budge. And all these people are, except for Martens maybe, are, huge left-wingers, and they supported their guy, and they attacked their conservative person in the dispute. And now that Zaev is in charge in Macedonia, a nominal, a left-winger, a socialist. Actually, even you could say a true socialist, given by his actions, by how he governs the country. And on the other hand, in Bulgaria, you have some kind of a conservative. All these people now take the opposite side. Take the Macedonian side against the Bulgarian side, but it's not moving Bulgaria 1 inch.
Right.
It's not going to make the Bulgarians budge, but it's very instructive about how, two-faced these people are. They wouldn't support Macedonia when it was fully in the right against Greece, but now they kind of support Macedonia, even though now we have a legally binding treaty, which we are, sad to say, violating. And they now say, no, now the Macedonians are in the right, and this is outrageous.
Right.
Ridiculous.
Well, again, all of these groups, as you mentioned, the think tanks, most of the media, certainly the elected and unelected, especially politicians and diplomats, etc., what's the word I'm looking for? Their influence is eroding rapidly, and they just don't have, whatever faith the Macedonian public had in any of them is almost nil at this point, and will go into the negative category soon. Interesting that you point out there the left-right divide and who's supporting who for whatever reasons, etc. So we'll continue to monitor that. As we look at the calendar, we know that the government of Zoran Zaev said it's going to continue talking to the Bulgarians, etc. The next General Affairs Council of the European Union, I think, is December 8 under the German presidency. And then after that, I think that's it for the year until... and then I think, Slovenia takes over in January? Or Portugal?
Slovenia and Portugal.
Right.
I think first Slovenia, then Portugal.
Yeah.
I think.
And then, of course, the Bulgarians, a lot of the background noise behind all this is the Bulgarians have elections coming up in March, parliamentary elections, and Boyko Borisov and his party is facing a lot of nightly protests by the Bulgarians because they are corrupt and not.
I think they died down. I just came back from Bulgaria, and it's not. I mean, they died down. There was actually a protest against the nationalist Vimera party and the Karakachanov guys, and one of his members of European Parliament was filmed leisurely throwing like these firecrackers in front of the crowd, and now they're alleging he tried to kill us.
No,
and it's just too much.
Yeah.
But because of COVID, the protests died down, but it's still likely that Borisov loses the elections.
Yeah. So the big question is, whether or not Zaev will cave in and give in to his demands in advance of those elections, or wait until after the elections to see what happens. But, again, better the devil you know than the devil you don't, than the one you don't. So whoever gets in after Borisov, if he does, lose in March, then what does that new government want in terms of all this? But I guess will remain to be seen. Zaev says he's not going to cave in, but every time he says he's not going to cave in, he does.
The socialists in Bulgaria who may win and probably form a government with the Turkish party or the minorities, like Zaev governs here, against the conservative and nationalist parties put together, they also voted in favor of conditioning Macedonia. They make the same statements like Borisov. So I'm not sure much will change. Even if they allow the opening of accession talks, there's going to be like 30 chapters which need to be opened and closed. So times 2, it's 67, 8 something times they're going to block us. So it's not going well, just as we predicted.
Yeah,
I do say so myself.
Yeah, and this all points to the failure of the European Union as an institution. Everybody is lamenting the fact that it doesn't really have a plan for expansion. It's not doing well in these areas. To say nothing of, Albania is supposed to start talks at the same time as Macedonia. There's separate problems over there. The movers and shakers within the European Union are desperate to see it succeed, and that would mean ultimately, in my opinion, that even if Macedonia must be crushed in terms of its identity and language, then so be it. If I had to place a bet on the the European mothers and fathers that want their little project to succeed desperately, then they would, whatever it takes. Again, this is something we've talked about and have written about for years, and in the whole Greece-Macedonia issue, those that have the power made the bet that whoever is weaker or could be bullied, that's where they should put their efforts, and they did. They put all their efforts on Macedonia in terms of elbow twisting, arm twisting. I'm getting my metaphors mixed up. Arm twisting, and basically said that this is the country that has to be destroyed. Sorry?
And kneecapping.
Kneecapping, there we go.
What you do with the elbow? Arm twisting, elbow?
No, it's elbow. It's arm twisting. I don't know what the elbow. I don't know where I came up with that one. So.
Yeah, I know you cap the knee, you twist the arm, but
and smash the head. Anyway, that's what they decided in Greece's dispute with Macedonia. That's what they decided was that Macedonia must die, and they succeeded in that. Now they're going to do the same thing with Bulgaria, I think, despite all their public rhetoric. We've even seen that. Muti Merkel said, both sides need to come to an agreement, and that's the same bloody thing she said with Greece and Macedonia. Both sides must come to an agreement, and so that means the stronger party, meaning the party that is in the clubs, quote unquote, gets to dominate, and that's their little project, their little EU project will eventually fold for that and many other reasons.
Well, listen, for a bunch of them, the actual goal, it's not destruction of Macedonia, but also it's not bringing Macedonia into EU and NATO. For some of them maybe, but for most of them wasn't. For a good chunk of them was just toppling the Conservative Party. They just have a map of blue and red states, depending on which color you want to use. And they just wanted to add one for their team, and they did, with Zaev becoming prime minister. And they said, okay, fine, we're moving on. We have our guy, whatever we want, he's going to do it. And whatever he wants is no longer that important. It was obviously important for a bunch of people to drag us into NATO, and that was delivered. And somebody ridiculously commented today, it was the Halifax, this NATO summit, they're doing it online now, obviously. And they said, look, NATO is still relevant, people still want to join, like Macedonia joined, and, we were dragged there kicking and screaming with 33, percent of the people supporting it, half of them Albanians, and half of them stuffed ballots in Albanian villages, which are depopulated. And they say, well, look, people still want to join. Like, no, we don't. And if you remove EU from the equation, and obviously we are removing EU from the equation, just imagine what the turnout would have been. If it was only you join NATO, maybe, possibly EU, we can't guarantee, but you have to accept all these conditions from Greece. It would have been like 20% turnout. It would have been ridiculous.
Yeah.
All of them Albanians.
Yeah. Well, we will see. Let's pivot slightly to marijuana, Mary Jane, marijuana. So Zoran Zaev, as he presides over this epic COVID crisis, almost 1,500 Macedonians dead, unfortunately, sadly. He and his family, of course, have been investing, I'm using the air quotes, over the past few years in growing marijuana for medicinal purposes and whatnot, and that's a whole other issue. But now he says he wants to make it recreational because he says it'll bring in tourism and that'll boost the economy. This is his new plan to make Macedonia successful and prosperous, is by legalizing marijuana for recreational use. I think the only other country in the region that is even contemplating this is Croatia, and they're looking at it very carefully before they do anything. And they don't, obviously they've got, 1,200 kilometers of coastline and 1,000 islands, so they're not doing it for the tourism revenue or anything like that. They're looking at it for other reasons. But Zaev is he pushing this forward? Is there legislation? What does he have to do to make this happen? Which I hope doesn't happen, I should add.
He declared a state of crisis, but that allows him to order people around, see stuff, etc., but not to adopt laws. The initial, there are two states of emergency here. The other is called, I think, Vonredna sustava, I'd say state of emergency. That was declared in
summer.
During the spring, yeah. Then the government was able to adopt laws using, by decree, by edict, and the parliament didn't convene. And they tried then to adopt an edict for marijuana legalization, and everybody laughed them out of town because it was so ridiculous. Before that, Zaev tried to adopt this using through the parliament, using a procedure where you cannot debate it much, because once they start the debate, Wemer is going to come to the floor and going to bring all the examples of Zaev cronies, relatives, Zaev's bishop, even his lawyer, getting licenses from the government in this strictly regulated manner, practically being given licenses to print money, to plant marijuana, ostensibly for cannabis oil production, but in reality everybody understands that this is being dried and sold at the black market, and now Zaev wants to legalize the black market. He thinks that the licenses he gave and very likely took money for are going to be worth much more if the producers are allowed to do not only the difficult to produce oil, but just dry the stuff and sell it as as ganja. So he currently does not have the right to do it by decree. I don't know what he's angling at, but he's talking about this non-stop, even more than about the corona or the European Union. He just keeps pushing about this. He can't even convene the parliament because 6, 7 of his members of parliament are sick, and he only has a cushion of 2. Actually, if one gets sick, he can't convene the parliament. He has 62 seats out of 120. He would have to rely on the opposition to do this, to convene the session, and the opposition was only willing to do this for the budget so far. They wouldn't allow it for anything else. So I don't know what's he angling, but he obviously, captured the business tremendously. His people are now trying to, his PR people are trying to sell this like, finally we're becoming a proper European country. The stigma of drug use, it's now you see what the difference is when you have actual lefties in charge. They remove unnecessary, they slaughter the sacred cows unnecessary, kept there. Why shouldn't people be allowed to smoke if they want to? But just imagine if Gruevski did this or Mialkov, if they had huge fields of drugs and wanted to legalize their drug business. It would have been, complete outrage by the same media who are now saying this is a progressive move. Zaev also wants to legalize now practically money laundering. He says a one-off tax of 10%, you just bring in your drug money and I'm going to legalize it. So this is also in the works.
It's got to be good news for Ali Ahmeti.
Yeah. This would require, I suppose, also parliamentary approval. He wants to legalize Bulgarian and Swiss cars, which are driven, the former in the east by Macedonians, the latter by Albanians in the west. Practically you avoid paying the taxes on imported cars by driving a foreign car through the country. He wants to sell a bunch of public enterprises. Some of them could be valuable, like the share the state has in the Macedonian Telecom, the Tecne Gotino oil-fired electricity plant. He wants to sell Ohis, which is worthless, but has very valuable, potentially enormous piece of land in Skopje, the chemical plant. So the post office, and even the railways. I mean, this is like a caricature of a British story. Whenever they run for elections, and the left portrays them in this crazy fashion, and they never deliver, even when they have power. So Zaev is actually talking about this, privatizing. Before the COVID, he was talking about privatizing the emergency response, the ambulances practically. Now he wants to privatize the post office, the railways, and everything else in the country the government owns. And knowing him, this would all go to criminals, to people associated with him, to neighboring countries. It's ridiculous.
Well, you make a good point there, because as conservatives, we don't necessarily believe that the state should be in the private sector business of operating things like this. There's a role for government, and we like to have a healthy debate about that. But what you just said there, him wanting to privatize it, meaning sell it off to criminals and whatnot, which we saw in places like Russia after the Soviet Union collapsed and things of that nature. Plus, he's just incompetent overall and wouldn't know how to do any of this properly. So it sounds like he is from what you just said there, he is just so rattled by the combination of the COVID crisis, the Bulgarian veto, the fact that there is zero foreign investment coming into the country. Of course, he's not pursuing it either. And the conditions don't exist for it. It sounds like he's so rattled by that, he's just kind of going off in 1,000 different directions, trying to and his PR machine, which is quite good within his own government. His PR machine is in overdrive, trying to put, to borrow a phrase from Sarah Palin, trying to put lipstick on a pig, is what it sounds like. So, wow. Well, the motto of the Citizen Party there in Macedonia should be, socialism destroying and bankrupting countries for 250 years, which is what his government and his philosophy and his worldview will do. So let's touch on. We've got a few more minutes here. Let's touch on COVID. We mentioned how many Macedonians have unfortunately lost their lives. Venko Filipce, the health minister, continues to insist that all is well. What's the it's the I can't remember the film. It's a comedy with Kevin Bacon as the policeman.
Animal House.
Yeah, okay, right. But now you had mentioned the new government, not a minister, but somebody's in charge of the response to the COVID crisis, Stoyanche.
Yeah. Yes, and if there is no podcast next week, that's because everybody is dead in this country, because
wow.
Zaev appointed this lunatic as head of the crisis management center, and now that he decided between the two forms of emergency to declare a crisis, and Stoyanche is now in charge, and he was literally bumbling on the microphone before the cameras in his first public appearance. He said, "Oh, got mixed up. I can't continue." It's completely ridiculous. This guy was like a police officer during the war in 2001. He was wounded. He got a battlefield promotion. Walks around saying he's a police general. Then he became like a mercenary in Iraq and Somalia, something like that. And then he decided it's easier money to be like the patriotic nationalist figurehead in Zaev's coalition. So whenever Zaev does all his treasons, Stoyanche is there to like, no, but Vumer are worse. Vumer are doing something else. Zaev is the patriot, and they trot him out to support Zaev. But completely, intellectual, limited, as you can imagine, and manipulative, populist, and best known now because he insisted that he's some personality on Twitter, and they invited him at the Twitter event, like Twitter party they used to have each year, practically to laugh at him. If you know the type of people who are on Twitter, Stoyanche is somebody you would laugh at, who they would usually mock. And he went there and he used his head to break a relatively thin roof tile, like in this Japanese karate style. So this guy is now in charge of COVID response. It's, even SDSM people are saying, okay, what are we doing here? Is this, are we really doing this?
Yeah.
And practically they declared the state of emergency. I'm not sure how that's going to relate to the marijuana, but they're not declaring a curfew. They're not doing anything else that's changed.
But they've taken over the private hospitals.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
So the government says the state of crisis allows us to marshal in resources of private individuals. And immediately, Filipce had the owners of the three largest private clinics in Skopje, Remedic owned by the metal magnate Mincho Jordanov, the Jean Mitrev clinic, eponymous for the cardiosurgeon, and most interesting of all, Acibadem Sistina, owned by Orța Campic, who was... Yeah.
Yes. We know. I think most of our listeners know the relationship between Sistina and the government.
Yeah, regular listeners of the show would know the name.
Yeah.
So after extorting money by him, by hook and crook, using Boki, using Katica Janev and everybody, now Zaev is in position to essentially commandeer his major hospital, which has, Jean Mitrev and Sistina have been treating corona patients. Sistina does a lot in testing, so they get a good share of the testing business, which funnily, the lab, you get the permit, that you are COVID-free, and it's signed by Healthcare Minister Filipce's aunt or something. It's signed by the Filipce family. They're, awash with money now because, they're doing the testing. They charge like 15,000 euros to treat a COVID patient. And every day people would beg on Facebook, like, please donate. They're killing me here in the public hospital. They have nothing. They won't give you a glass of water. There are not enough people. There is not enough oxygen. Even the easy stuff is not working, let alone the complicated stuff. I need money to go to the proper hospital. One of these people died after pleading for money. He was from Štip, the entire city was collecting money to get to. So it's horrible. And now the government says, okay, we're taking over, and they're going to make the functional hospitals horrible. So now they're looking into ways to do this, practically as a peace offering. The free private hospitals offered the old Sistina hospital, which is now a hotel. And Kamchev has been offering this from day one. He was actually very proactive, and even before this extortion, which is now ongoing, he said, okay, take the hotel, let's make it a hospital. And now the free private hospitals are offering to staff it and equip it and make it like a COVID clinic. Mm-hmm. And they're practically saying, okay, take this, we're going to outfit this place, we're going to have like 100 beds, and we're going to give people proper care, unlike your charnel house in the public sector. But don't touch our other businesses, like let us operate normally, but okay, we'll give you one proper hospital. And you, Zaev, are going to say, okay, I have this, my cousin twice removed is sick, you're going to treat him in a good hospital, but not going to charge anything, it's on the public dime, okay, fine. So this is practically where we at. The government is shaking down the private clinics for treatment after previously shaking them down, much more directly, as we saw during the racket scandal in Katica Janeva's exploits against Torce Kamchev.
Wow. Well, that's a big issue, big deal there. Obviously, for the sake of the Macedonian people, we hope that somehow this whole COVID crisis is lessens and comes to a conclusion. Of course, as we've heard good news, I guess, from some of the major pharmaceutical companies in the U.S. and elsewhere that they've come up with a vaccine, looks like, and so at some point, we do know at some point that this is all going to be over, and people are going to get vaccinated, at least those that want to, which is a whole other issue. But sometime in 2021, which I think would be a good way to end this podcast with a farmer's pick of a different sort this week. Cvetin, as you know, and you've lived here in America for a couple of years, we have Thanksgiving next week. This year we celebrate actually on the 26th, Thursday, and it just so happens, interestingly, that let me see if I can find it in here. Last Thursday. Oh no, this was on. Was this on the 26th? Oh, I don't know. Anyway, I want to the farmer's pick I want to have, or I want to present, is the Proclamation of Thanksgiving by President Abraham Lincoln in October of 1863. Now think about it. This is during the middle of a civil war that tore this nation apart and killed hundreds of thousands of Americans. It pitted American against American, and if the Confederate States had succeeded, who knows if we would be talking here today or not. The world would be a much different place. But in the midst of the Civil War, President Lincoln wanted to issue this Proclamation of Thanksgiving. And as we look back at 2020, we're coming to an end now. December's right around the corner. We have Christmas celebrated by the Protestants and Catholics, and then, of course, the Orthodox Christmas in early January of 2021. It's been a hell of a year in so many different ways, not just with COVID, but with everything else. And yet, we Americans will pause this coming week, to offer thanks. And as I wrote a few, maybe months ago now, a few weeks ago, for the new conservative think tank there in Macedonia, Sarissa, doing a series of articles on what it means to be a Macedonian conservative. And the first attribute or characteristics of conservative thinking has got to be gratitude, because everything flows from that. And so I think it's appropriate that not just for we as Americans, but I would hope that Macedonians would also pause, even though there is no day of Thanksgiving in Macedonia, although perhaps, Cvetin, when a conservative government comes back into power, maybe that is something to think about, is creating a day of Thanksgiving for Macedonians.
I can cook a turkey.
I'm sorry?
I can do a proper turkey.
We could get into issues of basically what's on a spit or a deep fried or in the oven or different ways of doing the turkey or ham.
Or just
ham's also
smoke the turkey legs.
Ham's also. But this is going to be the farmer's pick. Is again during the middle of the Civil War, President Lincoln, and this codified it. This made it an annual event with his proclamation. That setting up the last Thursday of November as a day of, quote, thanksgiving and praise to our beneficent Father who dwelleth in the heavens, unquote. So we want to offer that up, and for all who are listening, all of our listeners, we hope that you are grateful each day for the many blessings that you have been granted, that we all have been granted, despite all of the crap that's gone on this year.
And it really was a hell of a year.
And it's not over. And of course, as everybody keeps saying, well, I can't wait to get to 2021. Of course, I keep saying, well, be careful. It could be worse than 2020.
Yeah.
I hope not.
Yeah, careful what you wish for.
Exactly. Yes,
Rather bear those ills we have than fly off towards those we know none of.
Right. All right. That's a wrap.
Well, take care of yourselves, everybody out there, and convene next week.
Sounds good. All right. Take care.